guess we need to get Tim up here and teaching us about AI. So briefly this morning, he told me he's going to go beyond LinkedIn. He's got a few special slides. He was evidently in a conference and collected some good pre-zo information about additional AI things. So I'm really excited to hear what he has to say. So Tim, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Ted. Appreciate it. So I'm going to unmute myself now because I'm smart enough to bring my own.
Oh, you're going to unmute yourself because we're using right that. So you can mute yourself and you're good.
All right.
Okay. Can you guys hear Tim okay online?
Can you hear me?
I think so, yes.
All right. Good. Which now I get to project my voice as if I'm back in high school and drawing.
Can you share your screen?
So.
No landings that I know of. Anybody else here? Anybody landing? Any job opportunities you guys all want to share with the group? If you're brand new, we do have a LinkedIn group. So make sure you connect with me. Connect with me on LinkedIn and I will get you into the group. We have all of our announcements out there. We have job opportunities listed out there. And you guys are all welcome to post in there too. So if you have things to share with the group, information or job opportunities or anything like that, you guys can contribute to that as well for each other.
This is for any HR people. I know IoT is looking for a new CHRO. I talked to last week and they're going to be presenting a short list sometime this week.
So if you're a CHRO, talk to Jen back there. She can get you connected with the job. Anything else? Okay, take it away.
All right. So Clearman's actually heard this before. I have learned from Loke about LinkedIn because I have actually sat in a room like this, actually several rooms like this, being in transition myself. What I happened to do was purely out of interest, given the fact that I'm a technologist. And my job is really dependent upon me staying current with the latest thing. And the story really begins back in November of last year. Now, I've been on LinkedIn for a long time, and I've used it just like many of you have used it, which is to help plan my next position. And suddenly, there was this big buzz around this tool called ChatGTP by OpenAI. And I went, I got to get on board with that. I can see where the future's going with this. Now, understand that ChatGTP is a special type of AI. It's called a generative AI. So really what it is dependent upon is our interaction with the tool. And as a result of just doing some experimentation and figuring out what the right and left limits of this tool were, in February I started posting about what I was learning as far as ChatGTP was concerned. And I was amazed at the results. I went from an average of about 10,000 impressions per month to over 100,000 impressions in 1 month. Okay? Marketing folks. Do I have marketing folks? All right. What do we call that?
Fantastic.
Very true. Very true. I think the term is called stickiness.
Right.
So, yeah, and by the way, I'm the actor who plays a marketer on television. So, this is one of those where I'm going through this and I'm thinking, there must be something to this. There must be something to artificial intelligence and what it can do for any one of us when it comes to LinkedIn. So I decided to drill down a little bit further. And that's where I came up with, if I can use LinkedIn to help me generate content as leverage to draw people into the conversation, what could I do with LinkedIn and AI as far as improving my profile? And so this turned into a laboratory for me. And I'm not gonna bore you with the intro slide any further. I'm gonna go into the whole concept behind my approach. Okay, so I'm doing some myth busting here, right? So what do we think LinkedIn is?
Social media.
Social.
Okay.
Advertising platform.
Professional network.
Professional social media, professional networking, social media. Yeah, there's a massive database behind this. But I want to think of it as a platform, okay? It's more than just social media. Are you familiar, any of you familiar with a company called lynda.com?
Yeah.
Okay, so Microsoft in their infinite wisdom bought LinkedIn a number of years ago, and they bought lynda.com, and now Lynda is LinkedIn Learning. So it's more than just the social media aspect of it. In fact, I'll tell you that algorithmically, all the great, wonderful programming we hear about, especially when it comes to X, the former Twitter, in addition to many of these other social media platforms, Facebook included, you name it. It's all driven by mathematical equations, complicated stuff. I am a hardware guy. I happen to be a systems integrator as well. I make stuff talk to each other. I leave that software development stuff for people who are much smarter than me, but I am smart enough to go, okay, LinkedIn is more than just a social media platform. It's more than just a B2B advertising platform. It is really a platform to build community. Of course, we know what the primary thing was years ago, which was, hey, it's a great platform for job seekers to come and connect with opportunities. But it's also about content creation. And by the way, any one of us can be a content creator on LinkedIn. I know I am. And that opens up a whole set of tools for you to get your voice heard. You know? So I want you to really start thinking that this is much bigger than just getting your next position. This is really about positioning you for the future and creating opportunity where it may not exist today. All right? And I don't want you to think that you have to digest all of this all in one setting. I've given Brandy the slides, so she's got the content that she can push out to everybody. You know, it's B2C, it's B2B, it's C2C. Because there are a lot of people who are actually creating their own businesses on LinkedIn. You know, in fact, I'm connected to a number of consultants who they focus solely on LinkedIn. But that's only half of the story. And where we're going with this is the fact that there are so many nuances to LinkedIn, so many different facets on LinkedIn. I'm not gonna bore you with all of that. Loke does a great job of this. I think Terry
Sullivan.
Terry Sullivan. I love me some Terry Sullivan. He does a great job of this. But what I want to talk more specifically about is how is it that we use artificial intelligence like ChatGPT, like U.com chat, like Bing chat, in my particular case, Microsoft Copilot, because who knows, maybe it's because my company is a Microsoft partner, I have early access to Microsoft Copilot right now, pre-release version. And start looking at it from who you are and what it is that you want to represent. Now, each and every one of us is our own business. Am I correct? Okay. So, especially when we're in transition, we are chief sales officer, chief marketing officer, chief content creator, so forth and so on. So, LinkedIn becomes that premier platform for any one of us to start presenting what we're an expert on. Okay? The daunting part in all of this is really, where do you start? You know, anybody have an idea? Where would you start as far as starting to reach an audience above and beyond your current network of connections? Look,
The headline.
perfect. It's got to be catchy, right? You got to
Maybe the only thing that people know about you after they look at your LinkedIn profile.
exactly. And what else?
Posts. It's the first time that anybody ever really sees you.
True. So this is actually, if you think about it, and we're looking at it from the standpoint of linking these two concepts, your headline becomes the draw based on the content you're creating. Okay? Headline becomes a draw based on the content that you're creating. Okay? Much of what LinkedIn is geared for today is conversational content. It is about solving business problems. So much of what I get in my feed, and I don't know how you guys are, and a lot of this is really based on what you're looking at on a day-to-day basis, is people who are sharing solutions, or even better, people who are asking for input on how to solve their problem. So, for me, it's a marketplace of ideas. I don't know how you feel about this idea, but for me, it is really a laboratory, because I can prove or disprove what I'm saying has value. Now, I shared this with Tad earlier today. You know, the disappointing fact about LinkedIn, and this is really with all social media platforms, is about two-thirds of what's going on does not get engaged. So you've got about a third of the entire ecosystem of LinkedIn users who may or may not engage with your content. Okay? This is really where we start to get into, well, how do we drive engagement? How do we get in front of people? How do we get in front of decision makers? People who are interested in having this conversation with us. And the best way to do this, and I'm saying this because I'm a software development team coach, is to create feedback loops. Okay? And this is really where the artificial intelligence comes into play. So, you need to start thinking differently about your entire profile and what you're putting onto the platform. So part of this is really maybe, and I'm not going to say this to offend anybody, unlearning what you thought you knew about the way that the business world operates today. Unlearning what you thought you knew about the way that the business world operates today. Okay? The ugly secret about AI, nobody's talking about this yet, although we're starting to lead the conversation at improving, is the fact that it's not that AI is going to take any one of our jobs. It's going to be the person who understands how to use AI that's going to take our jobs. Because this is about labor compression. So, if you're going to be compressing labor, wouldn't you want AI to be on your team? So where would you start? Start with the thing that matters to you most right now, which is landing your next role. Bring AI into your team. Now, this is how I look at LinkedIn. Okay, AI is part of my Scrum team. Okay, if anybody, have you heard of the Scrum framework for software development? Yeah. So Scrum is like over 20 some odd years old now, and it's a way of working that's very collaborative in nature. Okay, and really a Scrum team, it can consist of 3 or 4 people. So if AI is on your team, a generative AI like ChatGPT, along with a visual AI like Dolly or Midjourney, suddenly you've got 3 members that you're not paying for on your team. You have to think about this in terms of, I've got automation available to me. I've got this wonderful library of experience, this huge data set of information to plug into. How am I going to make it work for me? How am I going to build authority, establish trust, solve wicked problems online? Now, I'm not saying that you take and write a 1,000-word post about how you solved a particular problem and all the specifics around it, but how can you use AI to craft an engaging 300 to 500-word post that allows somebody to go, ooh, they must have some secret sauce here. They must know something that I don't know. Or they may have tapped into some knowledge or experience attending a conference or being part of a career resources group or some forum that I currently don't know about. And this is that buzz. This is generating interest. This is really connecting with people. Okay? And the final point here is really this, using it to make life better. Okay? Each and every one of us, especially when you're in the job search, and I know this because I was out of work for nearly a year and a half. I went from being a senior manager at Verizon, merger and acquisition, one senior manager too many at the new company, to wanting to be an individual contributor. Tough shift. Not easy by any stretch of the imagination. Had I had AI, I think I probably would have cut that time down because I would have been able to generate interest in what I was doing in my search process. You know, people are desperate for transparency. They're desperate for authenticity. They are really desperate to connect. Because if there's only one thing that I learned as a result of COVID, and I'm telling you this as a recovering introvert, okay, and a recovering engineer. So I'm introverted and I'm an engineer. Not a great combination. I was perfectly content to work from home until my wife and daughters decided they were no longer content having me work from home. I was pretty disconnected. Come on in. I was pretty disconnected from my community. And when I say my community, I'm talking about people like me who are coaching teams on how to build better software, how to build better systems, how to build better tools. And that hurt. You know, this is your way to reconnect with your community. This is a way to find your tribe. This is a way to share your learning experience, create an authentic connection, and potentially solve a problem. So, by you knowing how to use AI, specific to your content creation, specific to what you want to do as far as supercharging or turbocharging your particular profile, you're putting yourself into a very special place. You are becoming part of the leading edge of a technology transformation. Okay? It is disrupting the world of business. There's no doubt. And by the way, this has actually been not necessarily broadly publicly facing. This has been around for over a decade. You know, it's just that it's caught into the public consciousness very recently, just in the last 2 or 3 years. You know, because it had been pretty much isolated to behind the scenes to people like me who are going, wow, I really need something better. So they build something better. All right. Do you know who your customer is, who your client is? Okay. Again, thinking in terms of you are your own company. You need to figure out who that right fit is. Okay. First and foremost, if you're looking for your next position, would you choose to take a role with a company that is not a good cultural fit for you? I don't know. I did accidentally, and I learned from it. I'll be honest with you, I'm a proud alum of IBM, but IBM was not the right cultural fit for me. So, again, you are your own chief marketing officer. You're your own chief sales officer. You're the CEO of your business. And by the way, when I worked with our interns over the summer on this concept, they were kind of shocked because I said, "Look, you're the CEO of yourself." And these are young men and women who are going into college and finishing college, and they're like, "Wow, really?" I mean, I thought I was stating something obvious to them, but they clearly were not prepared to accept the fact that as they're going into their career, they've got to be responsible for how they present themselves in the public eye. The network is certainly going to get you partway there. But how you present yourself external to the network is really what's going to accelerate your landing. It's going to accelerate your next step. I'm a firm believer that each and every one of us, for whatever the period of time is, has a place where we belong. Okay? And I'm saying that because when I was in transition, I started a 2-year journey, a conversational journey with improving. We do a wonderful thing in the vein of conscious capitalism. And if you're not familiar with what conscious capitalism is, I would encourage you to go out and do some research on it. John Mackey and Raj Sisodia wrote a book on this. John Mackey is the co-founder of Whole Foods. And it is really capitalism that does well for everyone involved. And please don't misunderstand, this is not necessarily the way that the World Economic Forum looks at capitalism. This is very different. Okay? And so I spent a lot of time looking at improving and going, okay, what is different about improving that I like, that draws me to this company, that makes me want to be a part of consulting? Because consulting was a radical departure from where I had been working for large corporations for the most of my career. And conscious capitalism was a differentiator. Also, trust was a differentiator. And those two things, because I spent 25 years in uniform, both active and reserve, being a force for good and building trust in high-performing teams, when I saw this at work as somebody who was attending groups in the improving offices, I went, man, these people, they really live what they encourage other people to live. They really believe what it is that's on the walls in their training rooms. And I saw this week in and week out. I talked to many people who were my former colleagues. And it goes into this whole concept of building a persona, okay? Fortunately, I was able to deal with real life people, my colleagues today, and I built a persona in my head of this ideal set of colleagues that I wanted to work with, that I wanted to spend time with outside of work. And this is where you need to start thinking differently about who it is that you want to reach on LinkedIn and how you're going to use AI to reach that person. So I think every one of us, I want to believe that every one of us, when we go through the search or when we're going through the process of connecting with potential clients, we're doing the research, we're doing the background, we're looking at how they connect or present online, what it is they like, who it is that they're connected to, the conversations that they're having. Because I'm a retired intelligence professional out of the Navy, I build my profile. I do a lot of research before I engage people and figure out how I can add or create or enhance value in their lives. And these personas help us generalize how we're going to target our message to the people that we most want to connect with and potentially go to work with. So, this research proposition is a huge part of how you're going to tailor your profile using artificial intelligence and reaching the folks that you want to reach, okay? Don't worry if it doesn't present well the first handful of times, whether that's content creation or whether it's your summary about you on your LinkedIn profile. It may take a little while to tune this up and get this right. This is really, in a sense, the new type of product development. Your LinkedIn profile is the product. And so, you're going to have to just go through some cycles and ask for some feedback from probably people in this room to go, hey, is this good enough? Does it present well? Does it connect? And hopefully the folks here are going to be forthright with you and say, yeah, you know what, that's a marked improvement about the way that your summary was before versus the way it is now. And it's all about these feedback loops and building trust within this room and building trust within your network. There is nothing wrong with actually posting something on LinkedIn saying, hey, by the way, I'm doing a series of experiments here. I ran this through artificial intelligence, and here are the two outcomes that it gave me. Specifically around how I phrased, growing revenue from, 2% per year to 7.5% per year. And you can do a side-by-side comparison, an A/B test on LinkedIn. Now, again, keep in mind that 2/3 of the people are just looking at content, and about 1/3 are responding to it. That's a good feedback. If you don't feel comfortable actually just asking somebody, hey, would you take 5 minutes and read over this and see if this makes sense to you? This is where these connections, both in person as well as online, are going to be super valuable, super helpful. And I have to do this myself, and it pains me, but I would rather have something be good enough, especially when it comes to doing things like this. I actually had members of my team review the slide deck before I presented. In fact, one of our VPs told me after the first time I presented this to the Innovators and Entrepreneurs Council, hey, you need to take out some stuff. And I went, whoa, wait a minute, hold on. And he said, no. You need to take out some content because people are getting lost. And I could see it when I was looking around the room. And I went, great, thank you. I appreciate that. And by the way, he's the other Tim. So when Tim and Tim are in the same room, I always say, talk to the other Tim. So he's much smarter than me because he's like one of these enterprise architect guys. So now we're getting into the nuts and the bolts, okay? And I'm saying this from the standpoint of there's a difference between being lazy and being negligent. Please do not misunderstand the difference, okay? Being lazy is using AI to your advantage. Being negligent is saying, hey, ChatGPT, I want a really catchy marketing phrase for my headline. I'm, a marketing director, and I want to land a role at a Fortune 100 company. Write something for me, and then just copying and pasting it, and putting it into LinkedIn, and being done with it. That is negligent. That takes zero creativity. That's a zero-sum investment. Please, 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 don't put yourself in that position. Be lazy. Be lazy all you want. Again, this is time compression. This is labor compression. It's a tool that can really help you accelerate and free you up for other more important and more enjoyable things as you're trying to grow your network on LinkedIn, as you're trying to land your next position, as you're potentially looking at growing future client connections in your next role. So the first of these 4 slides is really pretty simple, okay? Every one of us needs to learn how to do prompt engineering. So I ran you through a notional prompt just now, a lazy prompt, okay? The better the prompt, the better the output. The better the prompt, the better the output. And I'm saying this from the standpoint of having a conversation with our teenage daughters and trying to explain to them that asking AI a question is not prompt engineering, okay? And mind you, I'm, Gen Z, got a 16-year-old and a very soon-to-be 18-year-old daughter, and they think that it's just perfectly all right to ask ChatGPT a question and accept whatever it is that ChatGPT gives them. The truth is that because AI is a tool, we actually have to steer AI in the right direction to give us a reasonable and plausible and believable result. Okay? This is it's a skill that any one of us can learn, just like time management, just like planning. It's a soft skill. You know, it ultimately will lead to future success if you're willing to invest the time now to learn how to do this properly. And so I'm going to give you two great examples of this. All right. The first example, I'm going to share this verbally with you. I've actually written out this, and I'll pass this along to you, because I was experimenting and figuring out how I was going to do the right prompts for the audience. Let me take a drink for a moment. The first is very directive, okay? And it really boils down to, this is the specific type of outcome I want to achieve, okay? So, you frame how it is that you want it to respond to you. And you say, I'm a chief marketing officer, and I am looking to improve this portion of my LinkedIn profile. So you're already prepping the AI to look at what you're going to tell it to do in a certain fashion. You're identifying who you are, you're identifying the platform that you want it to write for, and then, and here's the tricky part, you give it some amount of content to work with. Okay? So maybe it's a paragraph, maybe it's a couple of sentences. And then you direct it to say, make this sound more humorous. Make this sound more serious. Make this sound more professional. Make this sound like I'm Captain Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean. You give it that context for how it's going to go through and rewrite that paragraph, those sentences, to give you something more along the lines of what you may not be creatively inclined to write yourself. Okay? If it becomes a wholesale rewrite and it makes you sound like somebody you know you're not, throw it away. Or, even better, test it with somebody. Say, you know what? I don't necessarily see myself in this vein. I don't necessarily perceive myself this way. But based on your interactions with me, does this make sense? Do you see me this way? You may get this feedback where it's like, well, yeah, you're a really funny person. And I'm like, not really, but I got teenage daughters. I'm definitely not. I'm not a bad dad joke guy, but I occasionally get some bad dad jokes in there when they're least expecting it around their friends. So, that feedback based on what you specifically told the AI to do, you gave it a role, you said, hey, I want this to be edited for this platform, and oh, by the way, this is the voice that I want to use. That's a great starting point, because you're already tuning up something that pre-exists. Okay? The other alternative path, which is the more interesting path, and one of my colleagues, he and I were talking about this, and David gave me this idea, and I thought, wow, David, you're absolutely right. He said, approach it from the perspective of being an executive recruiter or a headhunter. And I went, what? Wait a minute. He said, yes, think about this. Okay, logically, if you're not going to get the direct connection to one of your future peers or somebody who's going to become your client, approach it from a gatekeeper's perspective and ask it from the standpoint of, I'm an executive recruiter, or I should say, you're an executive recruiter. I would like for you to give me the top 3 interview questions that you would present to me for the role of a chief marketing officer. And then you start building against that. And you go through a series of steps of saying, this is the answer to question number 1. You copy and paste question number 1. Does this make sense to you based on the data that you have available? And then it will help you refine how that looks. Okay, and and that becomes the basis for something along the lines of what you put in those bullet points under your prior role. Okay? You can also use it to tailor your summary, especially if you know you've got a handful of target companies who are really interested in this type of information. And you could take that a step further with the AI and say, look, I am targeting these 5 companies within the Dallas-Fort Worth area that specialize in this type of fill in the blank, this type of social media marketing, this type of digital marketing campaigns. This, you know your role better than I do, but you give it the guidance and direction, and you don't ask it a general question. And it's amazing the type of outcomes that you can achieve just by understanding how to direct the artificial intelligence. So
I'm guessing that you could take your current resume, your current job description and title, and you could say, using this information, rewrite my resume or answers to interview questions or whatever in the context of, and it will better match that whole thing.
exactly,
Wow.
exactly right. So did everybody hear what Tab was saying? Okay, so this actually leads me to the second part. Now, I wanted to give you guys an idea of what you could do with it, but I also wanted you to understand kind of the risk involved in all of this, all right? The type of person who really reads the fine print on most of my tools, Yeshwant and I are in agreement on this because we come from a similar background. By the way, he is much more of he understands the large language models behind all of this more so than I do. He is one of those guys who's spent the time to learn how to build this. Okay, I know how to use this. So together we're like the Wonder Twins. His superpower activates my superpower activates. So understand the risk of putting your personal information into these AI models. Okay, ChatGPT is not going to tell you that once you put your information in there, it becomes their information to continue to train and refine their models. Okay, so be selective, and if it means that you tailor things and make them a little bit more general to kind of keep your anonymity, do so. Do so. Yeah. We've discovered, unfortunately, and I'll tell you a company here locally who discovered it the hard way. Some of their software developers were using, I think it was GitHub Copilot. And the company is Samsung. And they found out that GitHub Copilot had enough of their proprietary software code that a competitor could build an alternative solution against it. Okay? So think about this in terms of your personal information, the professional profile you want to build in LinkedIn, the tune-up on your resume. Okay? It's okay to sanitize information. I mean, AI is smart enough to be able to go to the distance and kind of use, in the term in psychology, is called an anchoring heuristic. It's a shortcut to get from point A to point B without taking a ton of logical, critical thinking steps to get to an outcome. It can do the work, and it can do the work against the pre-existing information that's already programmed in the model. Okay, so I am going to take a pause because this is pretty heavy. I want to open it up for questions because what I don't want folks to sit here and stew about is this concern of, am I at risk? I mean, it's a genuine question. Am I at risk? Is my personal information at risk? Is my reputation at risk? Am I at risk? You could probably fill in the blank and say, whatever your concern is. Because I'll do my best to try and answer that question based on the information I know.
I've got a question from the recruiter side of this. And this, Frank, feel free to step in since you're a recruiter, but are recruiters using AI now to, I know they use LinkedIn to search, but search has been around for a long time. But is it being used to do better job descriptions? Is it used in conjunction with search? I mean, there's two sides of this, and I'm guessing that we're looking at both sides tuning in. Is there a way that we can anticipate what's going on the recruiter side and how that they might dovetail and be more productive?
I will say this for our organization, our recruiters are encouraged to use and learn AI to help them. So
I think there are some startups out there too, right, that are focused on that as well. I personally know a few that are using this, and it's going to be part of their whole platform for their business model on making them a more effective search partner for companies and giving them the ideal profile for the role. So say, for example, you're I'll just use data science, you're a data scientist, right? A senior level data scientist in an organization focuses on X, right? So they're going to go and look at all those similar companies that do X and look at the profiles of those and seeing kind of like looking at stock market, looking at other trends to see how successful that company is, and then pulling that information together to create the ideal profile for that particular role, and then use that as part of their business model when they're trying to leverage and get business from those different companies.
Piggybacking further, once they've identified that kind of candidate, that's what their search criteria will be, and they'll search for that candidate. Some of those companies don't have those kind of job titles. The universities are not doing that, so there are not a lot of these kind of companies that are doing that kind of work. But they go ahead and find those specialists at those kind of companies, those kind of universities or organizations.
And they're using their backgrounds, right, to build that perfect profile.
So with both sides of the street getting smarter, this is going to be interesting to see how this really speeds things up. Because it's kind of a cut to the chase kind of race, right?
right, yeah.
I have another example. So one of the guys I know built a tool where he scrubs GitHub coders' code, and they use AI to understand if the coder is experienced or beginner coder. And he runs an offshore-onshore business, and he places those teams and says, do you need experienced or beginner coders? And he can actually identify them. And, it's a very successful onshore-offshore business if you're placing the right type of talent into these organizations from a coding perspective. Pretty cool.
Yep. Yeah. This is where, I'm looking around the room to make sure that I'm not, calling a certain generation out, where the concept of fake it until you make it, AI is going to figure this out real quick. It truly has no heart. It's got no deductive reasoning. It has no emotional attachment. It is cold. It is hard. It is calculated.
It's a probabilistic pattern.
There you go.
That's what it is.
An algorithm.
Yeah. It's very, very sophisticated statistical analysis, and it's always working off of a set of probabilities.
So I got a question. So AI is probably determining or helping determine the job recs, right? For at least in the company's job openings.
I would say in tech companies, definitely.
Probably right.
Yeah.
So are they looking for the optimal candidate, or are they looking for the perfect candidate? I'm thinking the latter.
I'm going to give you my standard consulting answer. It
Yeah.
depends.
Yeah.
It really depends. So if you're talking about a big tech company that has the money, has the capital behind them to look for the perfect candidate, certainly. You think Amazon's going to mess around with trying to find somebody who's got great soft skills and maybe an emergent technologist? The answer is no. I mean, and I'm saying that from the standpoint, unless that person is coming through as a referral, and then it's going to, move that person to the head of the line, pass through to that right conversation. But the companies that can afford to go after the perfect candidate are always going to afford to use AI to go after the perfect candidate. Most of us are not looking for those types of connections. Most of us are looking for good enough connections. You know, the relationship between, hey, I like you enough to where I think you're okay and you're worth bringing in for this conversation. And the inverse, of course, being, hey, I think your company is really, they're doing great things. They may not be blazing a new trail. They may not be innovating as fast as, fill in the blank. And so then it becomes the right conversation. And as a recovering engineer, I will say this, that engineering the perfect solution is always the best path to failure. And tech companies are kind of learning the hard way. With the number of layoffs that have happened this year alone within the tech industry, I think that any one of us could see that there's a red light that's flashing. They hired a lot of perfect candidates. They hired a lot of capable people. But engineers, as a bunch, regardless of what type of engineer you are, we're kind of a prickly group. We don't necessarily get along well with each other. So this is where that high quality, great potential, high potential candidate versus the perfect candidate, this is where reality starts to dig in. And AI, to an extent, because of the probabilistic nature of the way it's built, based on statistical modeling and creating these heuristics, these shortcuts, is going to end up landing on a right fit. It's kind of a blend between the high potential versus the perfect.
I think one important thing that you need to figure out is what is the perfect candidate, because you can have a perfect candidate on paper and be a horrible cultural fit.
Yeah.
You mentioned the prickly engineer.
Yeah, and
Well, that brings up a good question, because how does AI deal with the soft side?
I mean, we've got all the assessments out there too, right? There's 250,000 assessments on behavioral personality type stuff. So it could take all of that into account if people have taken the assessments.
yeah. And Brandy, you bring up a really great point. And this is something that I hadn't even accounted for, which is I've got a Strengths Finders profile, I've got a DISC profile, I've got a Working Geniuses profile. Now, if I decide to incorporate all of these into my LinkedIn more than just, hey, these are what my attributes are, to your point, Lo, then it becomes the pairing of hard skill and soft skill to create the right blend. The philosophy of not just the business, but your own philosophy about the way that work should, be integrated into your life, I think is going to be the more challenging piece. AI is not going to be able to figure this out. Okay, and I'm going to take a side note, and I know we've had a good conversation, but this is worth noting. A couple of years back, our CEO didn't ask me anything during our annual retreat. And he said, I don't believe in work-life balance. And that piqued my attention because this has been a buzzword for a while, right? Trying to balance what you're doing at home with your family and your close friends against your obligations at work. He said, I believe in the integrated life. I went, ooh, okay, this is new. And I could tell he really thought about this. In the integrated life, and we really strive for this at Improving, it's a concept where you can layer experiences that, as a human being, fill you up. They energize you. They charge you. They make you want to go in to work and be a part of something bigger than yourself. And when he and I talked about this, and he's a busy guy. He's running all over the Western Hemisphere at this point, between Canada all the way down to Mexico. He laid it out for me in 15 minutes and made complete sense. When I go into work, I hit a number of different things that are integrated into my life that help me be a better consultant. I like having fun at work. My colleagues are some of the smartest, funniest, absolutely off the wall people I have ever met in my entire life. These are men and women who have created software languages. They have written books. I've got one guy he's been a Microsoft MVP for 14 consecutive years. And I get them. Even though I don't necessarily relate to them, I get them. And so that hits that fun part. That also hits the human connection part. Sometimes we venture into that gray area where it's conversations around family and what's going on at home and the family-to-family connection. So that's another part of this integrated life concept. AI can't figure that out. No matter how good we engineer it, it's never going to figure that out. That's why it's very important to understand, again, going back to the earlier slides, who is it that you're targeting? And can you get along with them to really enjoy the work that you're going to do? And to Brandy's point, if you already know what your affinities are, if you already know where you're leaning, could you not build that into your profile on LinkedIn using AI as a tool to help define you and put that unique spin on how you present?
So you're capturing the subtleties of yourself in your profile.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. Now, when I rewrote a portion of my profile here not too long ago, I think I said something along the lines of, I'm not a very good people person, and I'm okay with that. Being an introvert, I value one-to-one connection. And I figured out how to navigate environments where I'm put into a room with a lot of people, and I find the one or two or maybe even three people in that experience that I want to have a good conversation with, and that might be 15 minutes, that might be 20 minutes, that might be half an hour. And I build in that experience so that when I'm moving around the room and I'm just introducing myself and touching base with different people that I know, I'm not neglecting the more extroverted part of being in those groups, but I know that if I can make those one or two connections in a larger audience, I'm going to feel much better about the experience, and I'm not going to be completely emotionally drained. This is where knowing yourself and knowing the type of company and knowing how they involve themselves in the community is going to be it's going to be a differentiator when you start looking at how you want AI to present you on LinkedIn. So,
Go back to your risk.
Yep.
Sir, what risks do you envision, say, using a Strength Finder's profile in AI?
I think Strength Finders in general is at least in the United States, quite well understood. You're certainly going to select out certain types of companies who are not looking for your strengths, but you need to be okay with that. For many years, I've said that maybe my mission in life is only to touch 0.1% of all the people that I ever come into contact with. If that's what it's supposed to be, that's great. I don't care, because it was the right 0.1%. So if you're good with putting that information out there on LinkedIn to really differentiate yourself and narrow that focus down, I say go for it. Experiment with it. Let it run for a handful of weeks. This is another concept, time boundaries. If you're not getting the interest and the traction that you're seeking within 4 to 6 weeks, change it. Change it. Because nobody's going to notice. They're not going to, they'll notice a wholesale change. I mean, if you dyed your hair purple and, you decided to start wearing a nose ring, but that's a whole other kind of conversation. They're not going to notice incremental changes, little subtle changes that again, you're trying to drive engagement, you're trying to drive connection, you're trying to draw people into the group conversation, but more importantly, into that one-on-one. So when I send out an invitation, especially to people that I want to connect with within my community of software development. I will generally say, hey, by the way, you know what? The post that you put up about X, Y, and Z the other day, really, I deeply enjoyed that. I truly appreciate what you said. Would you accept my invitation to connect? Because I know that oftentimes in the coaching community, unless I go out and take the lead on that, I'll be lurking on their profile. I'm not truly going to be connecting to them. I'm not truly going to be creating a conversation where we can add value to each other professionally. Because for me, I'm working in a space that is becoming widely discredited. And a lot of it is because people don't understand how to interact with people. People are cause of the problem and people are the solution to the problem. You know, and so I'm not looking to get into a public fight online on LinkedIn about the philosophical differences about ways of working. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build a community around, hey, you know what, let's figure out in our own context what works best for our teams, what works best for our companies, what works best for our clients. AI can't figure that out for me. It may be able to tune up a post. It may be able to tune up my profile a little bit. But again, this is where we have to step beyond using AI as a tool to, hey, this is going to be a human-to-human thing. You know, and maybe AI allows you to work on some of the language around it, but people will see through the inauthenticity. You know, and so for including anything on a soft level into your profile, I don't think that there's a huge inherent risk by showing your humanity. You know, each and every one of us is gifted. Why not highlight the gift? Why not highlight the skills that have been hard to come by and the success that comes with applying those skills? It seems to me that that's kind of like marketing 101. What differentiates you from everybody else who's trying to do the same thing? So, very low risk. Now, mind you, it goes into somebody's model, you know, but I think you can figure out how to navigate around so that you're not revealing too much, so that it doesn't become a lever for somebody who's running that same competitive race to be able to leverage. And by the way, going back to what Yeshwant said about probability, if you're putting the information in the model, it is highly unlikely that the model is going to create something identical when given a similar type question, okay, or when given similar type direction. Because these models are also developing patterns on how you interact with it. So it's honing its focus to give you a better subset of results. So you're actually training it as you're going along. You're teaching it how you are as a human being, which is pretty cool and pretty kind of creepy at the same time. So, keep that in mind. Not that it's a bad thing, it's just that it wants to give you better information in its results. So, risk reward. Just understand that you're going to have to be willing to expose a certain amount of yourself in order to reap the benefit of what these tools can provide for you. All right. This, and by the way, I'm going to apologize for these slides, and Randy's got the PDF. So these were originally from a LinkedIn post that I put out, and so you can pull it up and get the bigger picture. So these are all a bit of an eye chart. Thinking about incremental and iterative ways of working with artificial intelligence. Just take a few small steps to start. Look at it from the standpoint of, like Woke said, optimizing your headline. Figuring out what that might look like. It may take 3 or 4 attempts at, running it through u.com chat or Bing chat or ChatGPT to come up with something that really connects and resonates with you. In fact, if you're good at English, then more than likely it's going to give you something that's probably 75% where you want it to be, and you can tailor the remaining 25% to really hit the mark.
Just a quick note, actually 2 points. If you're trying to do anything with resume matching, I would encourage you to use GPT-4 as opposed to GPT 3.5, because I've encountered a lot of hallucinations with 3.5 Turbo that you do not get with GPT-4. And what I mean by that is it basically puts up garbage, 3.5, but GPT-4 is a lot more better, it's a much enhanced model. Point number 2 is when you're trying to get a profile or some kind of a prose that represents you, don't feel shy to keep at it in terms of going back to the GPT-4 model. That's great. Now, give me the profile kind of with this tone or with this angle. It's just like using a tool. GPT-4 or all of these AI models at the end of the day are tools. So don't assume that a one-shot, I ask a query and it gives me the response and that's it. You can actually have a back and forth, interactive, fine-tuning kind of a conversation, and that helps because then until it gives you a prose that kind of says, aha, that is what I want because that represents me. So it's okay to go back and forth about 4 or 5 times or how many other times you need to.
Yep.
And 2 things. What were the 3 tools you just mentioned?
So u.com chat.
U.com
Yep.
chat.
ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
And Bing, which also has a GTP model behind it.
So the first time I went out to find these things, I didn't know how to do that. Does everyone know how to find these things and download them and use them?
Not a clue.
Right. So can you please share, if I was a first-time user on any of these, how do I find it? How do I download it? Is it an app? Is it a web application? How do I get to it so these guys can learn?
Right. So most of this is best used from your web browser on a laptop, on a desktop computer. I know there are some people who use mobile devices. It's really challenging. I don't know about you. I don't think my screen is big enough to do this effectively unless I've got an external keyboard. You could probably do it on a tablet, but most of these tools, usually, I'm not aware of an app-based GTP client at this point. Are you?
There are a few, but they are not mainstream. Still going to a web browser is a way to go. And one more thing I would add to that is, I always like to cross-check what GPT provides with Bard, bard.google.com.
B-A-R-D.
B-A-R-D.
.google.com.
That's the Google version.
Right.
Yeah.
But for any kind of creative writing, ChatGPT is it. For more factual and more up-to-date, although that has been negated somewhat with the fact now that ChatGPT-4 incorporates Bing searching, but Bard is more for factual information, whereas ChatGPT is more for the kind of creative writing that you were talking about, the LinkedIn profiles or
And there's the image ones too.
Yeah.
So if you
Right.
said I want to take something from the movie Up and apply it to some other something, it will mash them together and create a brand new image that no one's ever seen before with elements of various images, which is important to y'all if you're writing articles and you want to have a picture up that no one's ever seen before, or a post with some sort of picture. So you can research those types of AI tools too. Yeah.
I just want to bring up a point. Some of these are not open source tools either, right? They're subscription based.
Yeah.
Because the ChatGPT 4 is, I don't know, $30 a month or something.
Right. Yeah, because
No, it's actually $20 a month.
is it? Okay. And I think the free is 3.5, right?
Yeah.
Non-subscription based. So
What other questions do you have about using these tools? Because we don't expect you guys to know about these tools and how to use them yet.
You mentioned the imaging one. What is that one sounds?
Do you guys know what would be a good one for the image?
So
or
there's
the art, kind of the artwork?
ChatGPT Vision, I mean, or you could go to the DALI models, also from ChatGPT.
DALL
DALL-E.
dash E.
Yeah.
and Midjourney is another one. So here,
Yeah, Dan, did you have a question too?
I'm just gonna say, just for those that have not been out, to get to DALL-E and ChatGPT, just go to openai.com. They're all linked. up.
exactly, openai.com.
You can sign up for an account, get the free 3.5, or pay for the 4.0.
Yeah, I was just gonna add that Shutterstock, which is a monthly pay account, but they're experimenting with AI images also.
Yeah, and I know Adobe has, I think it's called Firefly, which is now integrated into their stock image library so that you can do that. And of course, that's a fee-based access. So I'm going to blow your mind in all of this. You can use AI to create stuff on AI. So Midjourney is very heavy in the prompt engineering side of things. You can go into a ChatGPT-based AI and say, I want an image from Midjourney that incorporates a doctor, a nurse, and a sick patient in a hospital room with ambient lighting and sunlight streaming through the window. It will build the entire prompt so that you can copy and paste it into Midjourney and get some relatively good images without having to play around with things. You know, and that's, again, this is that labor compression piece. I don't want to have to learn prompt engineering for Midjourney or another visualization tool. It's not my thing. I'm a words guy. You know, I'm going to take advantage of that, and I'm going to say that we're all in a position right now where we need to be very careful about the intellectual property behind these tools. Okay, I don't know. Have any of you seen what's been going on as far as the writer's strike is concerned out in Hollywood? Not that any of us have any free time to be looking at, you know, stuff that's coming out of Hollywood. One of the huge issues that was on the table with the contract negotiation was, what is AI going to do to my job as a writer? Okay, I shared this with Tad because I felt it was a funny aside, kind of a sad moment this weekend. Matthew Perry, who played Chandler Bing on Friends, passed away. So imagine, if you will, that you're a writer who's trying to develop a brand new sitcom series. Okay? Friends stopped airing, I want to say, early 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, there's been a timeline. And the writers, this was their point. Okay? So I'm a struggling writer. I want to develop a new series. What is to stop me from going out, now that Matthew Perry has passed, say, look, I would like to create a pilot script using a similar format as Friends, with some of the keywords and phrases that were frequently mentioned in Friends, and I want to tailor it to the language of the current generation. You think that there would be a little bit of a legal danger in all of that? Yeah, just a tad, just a tad. So I am very cautious, especially when I go and post something substantial on LinkedIn or, well, okay, I don't post to other social media platforms. I have profiles out on there. And I generally will say very clearly at the bottom of my post, created with the assistance of blah, blah, blah. So that people do not get the impression that this is an original thought, okay? I would say, you know, make those statements up front because you don't want to mislead people, especially if you want to have a conversation at a future date where you're talking about a potential business relationship. Because, you know, if somebody gets you into that room and you're starting to have this conversation and they refer back to that post that you felt was so brilliant but was at least in some part generated by a chat client, using AI, you may be putting yourself at professional risk. You know, so it's just like writing in college. Cite the source, give proper attributional credit, and I would say even more important is, to Yishwan's point, if you give the definitive source list, you're going to be in a great position, because then it's like, look, I thought this was worthwhile sharing, and oh, by the way, here are the 4 or 5 definitive sources where that comment was, or where that post was derived from. And this is critical, because I am actually using this to put together conference pitches for different software development conferences, so that I can at least get consideration by the selection committee, so that I'm not building an entire presentation based on an idea that I had and having it sit somewhere collecting dust. I'm running the conference intent and what the theme is against these AIs and saying, hey, give me a catchy headline for this. And, oh, by the way, give me 4 points that would be of interest to the audience, and make it sound like fill in the blank. Because, just like in marketing, do we build an entire marketing campaign without kind of testing the waters and seeing if it might work with a particular targeted audience? Probably not. We want to validate what we think is good against somebody else who may or may not think it's good as well. And so I'm very careful to compress my labor to get into a conversation to say, hey, you know what, Tim? We think this topic has value. Tell us more. Then I'll go through the process of really refining those 4 points out, building an entire slide deck, and maybe even recording a video so that they actually can see that I know what I'm talking about before they actually bring me into a room or on a stage, because it's a risk. All I'm trying to do is narrow that gap, just like what we're trying to do on LinkedIn, narrow that gap so that the person on the other side of that conversation feels more comfortable bringing me in. I'm building trust in the process.
I think there's also an advantage for, I don't think any of us in the room are 20 to 25 years old anymore. And so there's a big assumption out there when we're looking at roles and people are looking at us, that we're not going to know how to use these tools. So actually, by advertising there, you're not only reducing your legal risk, but you're also saying, I've actually entered the 22nd century. And so, hiring me is not hiring somebody who used to know how to do stuff. And so I think actually, in some ways, as long as you don't overdo it, it could be a great billboard to put out there for yourself.
What else? We could use it for preparing for an interview. What else? Resume, executive bio, putting that together.
30-second speech.
30-second, which, by the way, if you need help with 30-second speech, you need to talk to Nick here. Say hi, Nick. His 30 seconds was amazing when he told me who he was in 30 seconds. I was just like, oh my God, you should be a coach on this. Like, it's the best one out of everybody in here that I've ever heard. What else? What else could we use this for in your transition time? You can maybe, like Tim said, find specific companies that you're looking for.
Well, I'm thinking combining this AI with search. So should you use AI to help you search better, or is the search built into and inherent in the AI, or how does that relationship work?
It depends. I mean, Bing, Microsoft, I'm not a big fan of Microsoft tools, but I will say where they're going with integrating AI into their search platform is a good direction. Notice I said good, right? It's not best, it's a good direction. So Microsoft at least is marrying the two.
So I could use AI to engineer a really good search to find opportunities, and then use AI again to best present myself for those opportunities. And that would be a very strategic way of using it.
Oh, sir. Yeah.
Now, I asked at one time, like, tell me what the fastest growing companies last year were in oil and gas or something. I was trying to find specific size for somebody that was in transition, and it said, sorry, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
We don't
Now-
have that data.
Data set.
Data
I'm
set.
the data set.
Yeah.
It was absolutely right, so.
But also 3.5.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah,
anything
3.5, what was
past-
it, 2021?
2021.
Yeah.
The last date for any training data for 3.5 was September of 2021.
Okay.
That is ancient.
What's 4.0?
4.0 is, I think, early 2023. No, actually, it might even be December of 2021. But here is
2022.
Yeah, 2022. And 4.0 with Bing actually gives you pretty up-to-date information. And one thing, if you are trying to research questions of the type you just mentioned, always insist in the prompt, provide references for your response. I do that as a matter of course. And you will find, especially when you're insisting on providing the references, sometimes it backs off, saying, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And that has happened to me with Bard. If Bard comes back and gives me a response which smells like BS, I say, where are your references? And it immediately comes back and says, I'm sorry, I'm still learning. So always insist on references.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, so back to Tad's question about search and integrating with AI. So Chrome has a setting whereby you can enter an option that will generate an AI response for every search that you do. So that setting, just you open that up, and then boom, every time you've got the little header with an AI response for it too.
John?
Is the, to your experience on 4.0, is the hallucinating better? I mean, is it?
It is much reduced.
Well, I mean, no, is it reduced?
Yes.
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 Jen?
In some cases, it's more significantly.
Yeah.
Even though
There you
it's,
go. There you go.
it's based on my background, what are the pros and cons relative to this job description? Right, so you're getting it to present what pros and cons someone might based on your own experiences, based on this job, so you can prepare yourself to answer those questions in the interview or tweak.
Now, could you say, I'm looking for all CEO roles available in the U.S. right now, posted anywhere, and would it give you actual CEO opportunities or roles that are
If it
open?
was linked to a web browser.
Right.
If they're crawled, it should.
When you say link,
2021.
Like for example, if I go into ChatGPT and I use the GPT-4 model, I can use the drop down and say use Bing search. And so then it will actually, in fact, before it gives you a response, it will go out and use the terms in your query to search using Bing.
can you add that to your prompt engineering and make it automatically do that?
Yes, I mean you can basically say use ChatGPT-4 with the Bing search.
You can tell it to use Bing and
At
Bard
all
and
times.
all
You're
this.
plugging Bing on top of ChatGPT-4 to do your search.
Wow.
I hope y'all are taking note who to talk to get this set up on your own laptop.
Can we do a quick poll to see who's paying for AI right now and who's doing the free version? Free?
Free.
Free?
Yeah.
Almost unanimous.
Yeah.
I think it's the best $20. I think it's the best $20.
So shocker.
You'll pay.
But who's gonna pay for the $20 one? Yeah.
Yeah, Gary, you had a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, was Bing search based on 3.5 or 4.0? Bing chat, I'm sorry.
I don't use Bing, but what I do is I use ChatGPT-4 and ask it to use Bing.
It's 3.5.
It's 3.5.
Yeah, so Bing chat is probably using 3.5 because they haven't rolled it out yet, and that has a lot to do with OpenAI trying to make money with ChatGPT-4.
Sure. Yeah.
But the best of both worlds is to use ChatGPT-4 and say use Bing search.
Okay. So if you use Bing search, it'll have Bing information for the old engine.
Are there any specific large language models or data sets used with a large language model that's just geared toward job search or resume matching yet? Have you heard of any?
I have not heard of any at this point. I know there are tools that do comparative analysis, but it's not based on LLMs.
Yeah, okay.
What do we think about doing something like find the specific role that lists the hiring manager? Could it separate those out potentially?
Potentially, but I'm not sure if the metadata would be available for that. You know, that's a $64,000. So not to get too far into the weeds, when an opening is posted, oftentimes, and it's more related to the back end, to the database, there is associated metadata with that posting. And so it will give a date and a time that it was posted. It will give a user ID that's specific to that posting. And so there is enough information if you can get behind the scenes in order to figure out who the hiring manager is.
We could also look at board of director positions. Maybe you could find those.
Yep.
One thing that might prevent these things like ChatGPT and even Bing from doing it is illegal to scrape a LinkedIn website. And in fact, LinkedIn recently won a high-dollar lawsuit saying that it is illegal to scrape LinkedIn websites. And so the reason I mentioned that is often on a LinkedIn job description you have the link to the profile, the name and the profile of the job poster, and that usually gives you insight sometimes to the hiring manager. But ChatGPT or Bing will not be able to go and get that information in a legal fashion. You can do it all day if you have a web scraper, but you would be straightly in the crosshairs of the LinkedIn bot detectors.
Yeah, is being able to scrape.
I can go and scrape it, but,
yeah.
But here's the thing: LinkedIn has got a number of hyperactive bot detectors who are constantly seeing who's scraping their sites. So you do not want to run afoul of that because they will create problems for your account. Your account can get
suspended.
Get suspended. So you've got to be careful.
And these are all valid concerns. And again, this is that risk reward.
But you could use AI to say, write me a Boolean logic prompt for LinkedIn to go search for this, and that's okay.
Certainly. Oh yeah. I mean, if you're not good at writing out all of these search queries, you use AI. It is your friend, and you might learn something in the process. I find that given the fact that I used to know how to write SQL queries many moons ago, oftentimes if I'm being asked, hey, can you extract this type of information out of a database? Why am I going to waste my time trying to relearn stuff that I knew 15, 20 years ago when I can go to an AI and say, look, these are the specific things I'm looking for to give me a starting point.
Write the SQL script for me.
Exactly. Yeah, that's where I would go to GitHub Copilot.
So I've noticed Paula is a top voice on LinkedIn. I've noticed that you're a top voice on LinkedIn.
Yep.
How did y'all pull that off?
There are collaborative posts out there that you can actually go and find, and then you go in and add your own comments to it, such as mine is running cross-functional teams. And you go in there and you give them your experiences, and then other people come in and they read your post, and they can either vote it up or vote it down, or prove it, like it or not. And when you get enough that you posted enough, and enough people coming through and saying no, they're correct in what they're saying, or they like what you're saying, then you get your badge, and you just keep it up after that.
So you said you go find. How did you do
I
that?
don't remember exactly. They asked me to come and start talking on them. There is like multiple different subjects. So if you go to LinkedIn and you search it, do you know how to do that? Okay.
A lot of it is your hashtag search.
It was like just go in and go search for collaborative posts. There's a whole section of them.
So it's a type of post?
I get an invitation about once every other week from LinkedIn to collaborate. Member top.
Why are you so
Irish
special?
top.
I've never been asked.
So Paula, are you a content creator on LinkedIn? Do you have creator mode
Yeah.
enabled? Okay.
Creator mode.
So
Yeah.
that may be part of it. I've got creator mode enabled as well.
I'll offer one observation. So I added my first piece of IP content in an effort to build a board and that type of thing. And not shortly after that, I started getting contacts by them saying, would you write around shared services and outsourcing?
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's smart enough, obviously, it looked at what I was contributing and then said, hey, let's see if we can get Steve to do something else in that area.
Yeah, so I frequently get asked to contribute to the articles in specific agile product development as well as Scrum being a framework in that ecosystem. And now I've moved from being a top voice in agile leadership to being a top voice in Scrum just recently. So it's a cumulative effect. Now understand that most of these collaborative articles are actually generated from the outset by artificial intelligence. So all you're doing is contributing to the body of knowledge by adding your particular experience or your particular understanding. And I think, to Brandy's point, this is a really great way to get a spotlight on you that you may not even know you're looking for. Because if you're a top voice and you're adding value to the community on these LinkedIn articles, it means that you have something that other people probably ought to learn about. They probably ought to understand where you're coming from. Is it the killer identification badge? Maybe, maybe not. It is your investment on the platform that drives this. And I'll tell you, I don't spend all that much time in my posts. Now, it's like going to the gym. When we're talking about using AI for all of this, it's going to take a bit of time. And this leads into this slide here. Done is greater than perfect. Get stuff done. I would use another word for stuff, but we have an audience of professionals, so I want to be respectful. I am a Navy sailor after all, so my preferred term is probably 4 letters. So you can't worry about it being perfect. Again, 2/3, maybe even a smaller slice, a quarter of the people out there are going to interact with you on this. Okay? The key thing is you've got to start. And you start working this cycle. And you start getting better at using the tools. And the more refined those responses become, the more in alignment they are with who you are and what you want to represent to the people that you desire to have a conversation with. It's offloading a lot of this heavy lifting onto tools that are specifically designed and engineered to compress labor, to allow us to go on to other more enjoyable things, like sitting in a room learning about AI.
Just another answer to the question that was, how do you kind of raise your profile or what have you? I was talking to somebody who had done some work on the algorithm at LinkedIn, and one of the things he said is, we can all help each other, which is if you just like something, it doesn't raise the person's profile at all. But if you comment on it or share it or repost it, it does. So if you want to help each other and help your colleagues, rather than just saying, take the 2 minutes to just write a one-liner comment and post it.
18 or more. Actually, I heard it's either 12 words or it's 18.
18.
So you have to write a certain amount of words.
Throw hashtags in there.
Throw hashtags.
At
Yeah, if you would count, Jerry.
Hold on.
So I also heard that when you post an article, if you got some impression within the first 90 minutes, that helps you, shoot up your.
So and this is in general. This is a great point. Content creation in general, whether that's a post, whether it's a short video, whether that's a LinkedIn live stream via audio or audio and video, whether it be an article that you're it's long form writing. All of that, the engagement window to kind of get into that golden acceleration path as far as overall content before people is within that first 30 to 60 minutes. Okay. I know companies, and I've been following enough of these businesses to realize that because they're so deep into understanding all of the back end stuff that's going on, it's really good to follow them and see what types of posts they're putting together. They've built entire businesses on the use of LinkedIn. So the algorithm changes so quickly that the window is going to constantly change. So we're always going to be a little bit behind Microsoft and the big machine that it is, but that's okay.
I've gotten a lot when I write I write a post and then I do the @ symbol with people's names, and I do like 20 people's names that are on it. Man, that thing gets shoved out and skyrockets. And it seems like that's better than if I write the content and then put the @ symbols in the comments. It's like it's better for some reason.
So there is a penalty involved in that. Yeah, there is a penalty involved in that.
It's tempting, though.
and this is where gaming the algorithm is going to be key. Okay, so if you know you're going to add 15 people, why don't you reach out and contact the 5 people who would actually comment on it and react to it before you post? LinkedIn has geared the algorithm as of late this summer to prevent viral acceleration. I'm going to say that again. It is looking to throttle content that goes viral, and we're talking exceeds a certain amount of acceleration as far as overall impressions. If you're getting the cool thing about this is if you get 1,000 impressions within the first hour, it will accelerate naturally along a gradual slope. However, if you game it and you're part of a LinkedIn group and you're tagging 20 people and it's accelerating to, say, 2,000, 2,500, it's going to actually penalize you on the next post. It's going to look at what's going on mathematically behind the scenes, develop its own, through the analytic engine, its own hypothesis, and it's going to say, no, we don't like that.
Can you put drag on it then?
Exactly. So building gradual increase is fine. I was just lucky to go from 10,000 to 100,000 in 1 month, but it was because it was a hot topic. It was really interesting to people because in many ways people didn't have access to the tool in that first 6 months. I hit it in November, I started posting about it in February, and it went parabolic. It's not going to be the case with everything. There are certainly going to be topics that are of greater interest. And I'll be honest with you, if you think about it, with today's market and the way that the economy is, job search and trying to get the edge is a hot topic. Recruiting in general is a hot topic. People are trying to find answers as to why they're not getting traction on these platforms. And so, topically, you can speak to not only your connections, your first and second degree connections, but if it's really something that is in the general consciousness, there is that possibility that it spikes. And even a light amount of gaming isn't a bad thing. But there could be that trade-off. If that post accelerates too fast and suddenly you're in the neighborhood of 2,500 to 5,000 impressions within the first hour or two, you're on the risk that the next post or the next post or the next post is going to get spiked.
So you want to find the sweet spot.
Right. Yeah. And I look at the trend. So creator mode is great, and I know this is kind of far off, but if you're using AI to scaffold the work that you're doing, understand you're going to need to have analytics to figure out what's working versus what's not working. In creator mode, you've got 365 days worth of analytics in a graphical format that you can look at and go, oh, okay, I see how this is gradually increasing over time. I see how I went from 30,000 before I started posting almost every single day for a year to 500,000 impressions. Now, impressions are great. That's what makes me feel good. That's what makes all of us feel good. The true metrics that matter are the engagement metrics. It's, how many people are giving you a thumbs up? How many people are commenting? Because when you start seeing those accelerate over time, that's when you know your content is getting to its audience. The funny thing is that when you write a post on LinkedIn, if you're having AI do kind of all of the heavy lifting, there's, I want to say it's a 15-second, I think it's 15 milliseconds that somebody stops on your post. And generally, I say, okay, if somebody expands your overall post to look at it, that's an impression. Right? So if they expand the post, they look at it, they may not read the whole thing in its entirety, depending upon how long it is. You're getting the benefit of the impression, and you know that people are actually kind of there. They're in that 2/3 to 3/4. So if you're using AI and you find that topically you're hitting the right things and people are expanding the post, now you need to start asking AI or directing AI to look at it from the standpoint of, okay, based on these types of posts, I would like to make more of these posts.
One thing I have noticed is don't just repost it. If you're going to repost it, add comments. And that increases the engagement. And given the choice between making a comment on a post versus reposting with that same post as your, it helps. Improves your engagement.
And there's a balance too. Okay, you think about the network size in all of this. To Yushwan's point, repost content that somebody who has a smaller network than you do, and repost content for somebody who has a bigger network with your own insight, with your own understanding, how it connected with you. Because you're lifting somebody up here and you're getting the recognition of leveraging the larger network as well. Lot of goodness in all of this. Because again, LinkedIn has geared itself to be a conversation. It's not just a billboard for us to find our next position. It's really about solving one another's problems and being engaged in community. I trained our recruiting team on this, and I've given internal training. I developed a 4-part series specifically around what it means to reach out to your target audience. Groups are a huge, huge part of this. If you are not subscribed to I think it's a maximum of like 90 to 100 groups, if you're not hitting those groups and routinely posting content to those groups, nobody knows who you are. Nobody knows that you're an expert. This is where I get a lot of my engagement. This is where I get a lot of my impressions from. And what you've done is you've just started speaking to marketing professionals. You started speaking to software developers. You started speaking to chemical engineers. There's so many affinity groups out there, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Recruiting as a whole. I think there's like 3 to 5 million people who are following that hashtag, who are in these groups, these publicly accessible groups. Now, understand you're swimming in the same sea as everybody else, but if a chief human resources officer is looking for a vice president of something, and they're seeing your post because you went out to the human resources group and were putting your view out on how to solve a particular problem in that particular space, do you not think that they would go, hey, you know what, I want to have a conversation with them. I think they would make a great deputy. I think that based on what they've said on this particular problem, it's worth bringing them in.
You guys, we're gonna start wrapping up. Do you have another
No, I was
question,
just gonna
John?
say, so if you walk all of this conversation forward, you know, I think a Terry Sullivan might say, you know, well, the question for me is there a more optimal time to post than others? Is there a more
Certainly.
effective time?
Certainly.
You know, I think a Terry Sullivan might suggest Saturday mornings, right, as one optimal window to post.
To capture CEOs.
Right.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Richard Vanderblom has done extensive research. He puts out a report every single year, multiple pages. I think it was 54 pages this last year. I'm looking forward to it. It should be coming out here fairly soon. And he goes through in depth, you know, the optimal windows for posting to get people and when they're browsing, you know, in addition to all of the other stuff that's going on behind the scenes. And he's out in the Netherlands. You know, I'm looking far afield. I think we have a misimpression about where expert knowledge resides. And if we're not looking outside of the United States for some of this expert knowledge, we're not doing ourselves a service. You know, because if people are building businesses off of a platform like this to show others, whether it be companies or individuals, how to effectively leverage it, I don't know. I mean, we may be missing an opportunity, right? You know? So I wanted to wrap up, and I'm going to shut this slide down real quick to Brandy's point. Dad mentioned it, so you know I mentioned the fact that I was in an AMA with our CEO. We do an annual retreat. It is something that culturally as a company, the executive leadership team thinks is a huge, wonderful, one of the best investments that we can make in our 1,600 consultants. And so this last retreat, which concluded at the beginning of the month, one of the things that I did is I sat in a room with our chief consulting officer one morning, and then in the afternoon the next day, our team who's AI focused. And one of the things that we've done internally, and I think this is a huge thing from the standpoint of where we foresee AI going, is we're approaching AI from the standpoint of investment, okay? And by investment, what I mean is we're sitting back and we're saying, okay, does it make sense for an executive or an executive team to invest $100 million in building a custom AI model if, in fact, you can leverage a subscription service that allows you to use a pre-existing AI model and have a tailored custom instance that taps into your resident data. So software as a service, okay? And in that vein, we're seeing this huge opportunity show up where it's like, why spend $10 billion when you can lease space on Meta's model, or Microsoft's model, or OpenAI's model? It makes a lot of sense. And so the slide I'm going to show you is actually kind of the most useful tools that our team really went out and tested. And it's going to be, so I'm throwing this up here because I've mentioned a few of these in the process. And my desktop is not helping me out right now. Resharing the screen. So these are the tools, the publicly available models that our team has tested and said these are useful. And one of the things, to keep in mind is this is, tool itself in addition to its usage. Okay, these tools in many cases are going to be driving the future of business. So if a tool is in your particular space, say like data rails for accounting automation, start learning data rails. Go out and spend some time understanding how data rails works. Because that's the future of the way we're going to be working. This is about labor compression. It's not about me or you losing our job. It's about understanding how the tools work to compress labor, get us to a solution faster, and being ahead of the people who are not in this room this morning.